does not say there cannot be military action against terrorists or cartels or drug traffickers. It just says that the United States should not be at war without a vote of Congress. The United States should not be at war against groups on a secret list prepared by one individual who is unwilling to share it with Congress and with the American public. My colleague said that we should put a resolution on the floor thanking the president. I have an idea for my Republican colleagues. Put a resolution on the floor declaring war against narco-traffickers. Why haven't they done that? That's what the Constitution says they should do. They are so strong in their belief that we should be at war with narco-traffickers. Why haven't they put a resolution before this body to say we should be at war with cartels and narco-traffickers? There are two reasons. They know it would fail, even in a Republican Senate. And second, they're afraid to vote on that resolution because they know their constituents are tired of wars and don't want Congress declaring more wars and treating serious law enforcement problems as challenges for the United States military. I strongly support the resolution that my colleague has filed. When President Trump announced in August that he might undertake this action, Senator Schiff and I conferred with other senators, and when the first strike was taken on the 4th of September, we wrote a letter to the president as the Article I branch charged with the power of declaring war, asking him a basic series of questions. Give us the evidence that these boats were actually carrying narcotics. Give us the legal rationale for striking them without coming to Congress. If you knew where they were enough to strike them, you could have interdicted them. Why did you choose to strike them and not interdict them? We hear that drugs are now at the bottom of the sea. If you interdict a ship and you seize drugs, you get evidence, you get individuals that you interrogate, and you build cases against the higher-ups in the narco-trafficking ring. When you destroy a boat, you don't get the evidence. You can't build the case. And we asked, why not interdict? Why strike rather than interdict? These were questions that Congress has a right to know the answer, and the American public has to know the right to answer. And we asked the president, give us answers to these questions in 7 days. Not unreasonable. We have yet to get answers to these questions. The administration believes it does not have to justify these actions to Congress. It does not have to tell us the evidence about the narcotics content of these boats. It does not have to give us a clear legal rationale. It does not have to explain the decision to strike rather than to interdict. When you ask basic questions and you're not given answers, you get suspicious that the answers are not forthcoming because there aren't good answers to the questions that we asked. We did have a follow-up hearing, the Armed Services Committee in the secure facility last week, and I can't really talk about what was said there, but I can sure talk about what wasn't said there. No answer to the question of why not interdict? It was asked over and over and over again. And aside from asserting we have the ability to do what we did, they could not provide an answer about interdiction. They could not provide clear evidence that all of those boats actually had narcotics on them, even though they knew we would be asking that question. And so the legal rationale, all they said was the president has an Article II ability to undertake these actions. Saying I can do whatever I want under Article II is not an answer, and that's no legal rationale, but it's essentially what the president is saying. I can put groups on a list, and we understand it's many groups and their affiliates, and not tell Congress and not tell the American public, and I get to make the decision about whether the nation goes to war. That's not what our Constitution says. My colleague, Senator Schiff, has talked about the Constitution, so I won't belabor it, but there is a couple of points that I do want to stress, because there is nothing more important in the Constitution than the power to declare war. The founders who wrote the Constitution in 1787 debated this topic extensively, and they recognized a reality. In the world at the time, decisions about war were made by the executive, king, monarch, emperor, czar, pope. It was made by the executive. The framers of the Constitution in 1787 were dealing with leadership that included the first president of the United States, George Washington, the greatest general that's ever been president of the United States. They revered George Washington. But when they had to make a decision about who declared war, they said, even George Washington is not smart enough to carry that sole decision on his shoulders to make war. And so they decided to do something almost completely contrary to the whole flow of human history, and they invested the power to declare war in the legislative branch, in Congress. And my colleague read Madison's exchange as the principal drafter of the provision with Jefferson many years later about why they had done it. They wanted with studied care to vest the question of war in the legislative branch. It's not only in the Constitution, it's in the Constitution for a reason. And here's the reason. A decision about war puts troops in harm's way, puts troops in a position where they may be injured or killed. They may see their best friends injured or killed. They could come home with physical injuries or mental injuries that could affect the remainder of their lives. The Constitution of the United States, in a somewhat unique way, requires congressional approval for war so that there is a consensus of the nation after a full debate in view of the American public and a vote that the war is in the national interest. If a president goes off unilaterally without getting Congress on board, then we're asking people to risk their lives with no national consensus that the mission is worth it. Could there be a grosser example of public immorality than to order troops into harm's way where they could be killed and their lives and their families affected for the rest of their lives without a national consensus that this is a mission worth you risking your life? That's why that provision is so sacred in the Article I branch, and that's why even George Washington was not entrusted by the framers of the Constitution to make a decision like this on his own. I will finish where I started. This is not about dissatisfaction with President Trump. I filed similar resolutions, as my colleague from Idaho knows, when President Obama was president. I came into the Senate in 2013 with an absolute obsession because of the military nature of my state, because one of my kids is a Marine, with an absolute obsession that the nation should never go to war, never, without a debate in Congress that the American people can see, can learn from, and a political consensus that the war is worth it. Yes, there is an exception for defense from imminent attack. That's been understood as part of the presidential power of commander-in-chief since the very first days of this republic. But even in that instance, it was always foreseen that Congress would come in and have a debate and agree or not with whether they blessed the mission or not. Letting a single individual take us to war based on a secret list that he won't even reveal to the public or to Congress sets such a dangerous precedent. And if my colleagues, as they've stated, believe we should be at war in the Caribbean or at war with nations in the Americas over the narco-traffickers, they've had the ability the entire time to bring a resolution before us and have that debate in front of the American public. And I have a feeling that debate would produce some positive votes if it were limited enough. But to allow a president to do it by secret without Congress having the guts to have the debate and vote about whether the war is worthwhile is contrary to everything this country stands for and to the oath we take. I would urge folks to support my colleague's resolution. I would ask that we yield back all remaining time.
Without objection. Clerk will read the title of the joint resolution.